Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Tuesday to everybody, and welcome to the Seth Joyner Show. Not a whole lot going on in the NFL as of late, but we are 9 days away from finding out, first of all, who the Philadelphia Eagles are going to pick at 12 if they stay at 12, but also we got an opportunity to see where teams are going to, how the teams are going to move around, who's going to get picked where, and quite honestly, I'm about tired of all of these mock drafts. I can't wait for the next 9 days to fly by so we can finally figure out, who's going where. We can move on from all the procrastination and all the prognostications about who's going where and who should draft who. Only the teams know who they're targeting, who their first and second and third picks are, depending on where everybody else is falling. And like I said, I'm not much for, mock drafts, but I'm going to run through a little later on the 12 picks and where it is, the Philadelphia Eagles probably will fall and, who's going to fall to them if Howie doesn't make another move by the time the draft rolls around next week. As you know, today is Talk to Him Thursday. So I'm fielding your questions. Let's talk about, not only what's going on with our Philadelphia Eagles, but let's also talk about what's going on around the rest of the NFL. One of the things that I wanted to touch on today, as I began to put together, the content for the show, is okay, what to make about these entire teams opting out of the offseason program. First of all, let me say I'm sensitive to, and I feel for anyone who's struggled with and that is dealing with the COVID-19 virus. I also want to say that as a football player, you want to play football as much as you possibly can. That includes, the offseason program. There's two pieces here for me that's a little disturbing. And let me say that if a guy has, health concerns, if a guy has a family member with health concerns, I get it 100% that the opt-out is what you should do. I love the unity of the players to come out in teams, and the Philadelphia Eagles announced today that they'll be opting out of the offseason program. I get it. I understand, that you have to take care of your family. You have to do what's most important for your loved ones and be safe and feel some level of safeness for yourself. But players are going to work out. Players are going to get together. And, my thing is some of these guys are, if they make a decision to opt out, they are going to forfeit workout bonuses, 100,000, 100,000+, to work out with the organization, with the team in the off season. The other thing is some player somewhere is going to opt out and he's going to get injured in the off season, and he's not going to have the protections of working out around the organization against his contract. He's going to lose a lot of money in that process. The biggest part for me is the young guys. I talked about this in a tweet today. I think that the first off season for a young guy is the most crucial and most important offseason of his career. You just got drafted last year. You went through the ups and downs of playing, potentially 10, 11, 12 games to playing 16 games for sure, along with, if your team was fortunate enough to make the playoffs, however many games you had to play during the playoffs. And now you go into and you're trying to figure out how to be a pro. You're trying to learn a new system. the game is faster. It's much more complicated and complex. All of those things, that a young rookie has to deal with in his first year. Well, now you move into your first offseason and you have an opportunity, to go back and look at what you did right and what you did wrong throughout your rookie year. You have an opportunity to correct those mistakes and those shortcomings, not only on your own, but under the watchful eye of your position coach and your defensive or your offensive coordinator, or your special teams coordinator for that matter. For a young guy, I know for me, I can remember, my first off season, I went in, was talking to Buddy Ryan. He said, hey, you had a good rookie year. You fought through, you got an opportunity to start. You got your foot in the door. Now kick that SOB open and take the job. The job is yours to lose. He said, by the way, what's your plans for the offseason? Well, I think I'm going to, go back to school, work towards finishing my degree. And he looks at me and he says, the offseason program begins February 29th. So you got to make up your mind. You either want to be a student or you want to be a football player. And it's pretty evident, what the decision was going to be. And then he kicked me out of his office. These guys now, and I understand the collective bargaining agreement has set things up the way that they've set them up. And these workouts are called voluntary workouts, and the guys don't have to show up. But for a young guy, it's instrumental, because what do you do in that first offseason? You get an opportunity to not be around the entire group at your position. You get an opportunity to do some one-on-one work with your position coach. You get an opportunity to get in the weight room where it's not crowded with every guy at your position or 2 or 3 positions at one time. And you get to work with the strength and conditioning coach to get to work on the things that you need to work on to be able to take your body to the next level. But for me, I got an opportunity to work on man-to-man coverage every single day, learning how to play man-to-man coverage and the techniques that went along with it. We looked at film and we looked at blocking schemes, and we looked at how teams were going to try to attack the multiple fronts that we ran and where I fit and what my job was supposed to be. We lined up and dropped in the zone coverages over and over and over and over again, and got an opportunity to understand what everybody else was doing around you. So that gave you an understanding not only what your job was, but what the entire defense was trying to accomplish. It allowed you to work on all of your mechanics, all your fundamentals, and all your techniques that help make you a better football player. And for me, it was critical because I worked. It's not like, these guys are having to come in and work from February 28th through the time that the coaches went on vacation in June. They've got is OTAs. You come in and you work out, on your own. If you have a workout bonus, so you're working out with the team as far as your training, your lifting, your running, and all those things are concerned. But the on-field stuff, they're limited how much they can actually work with and get with the coaching staff in the off season. So every opportunity that a young guy has to sit with his coach and look at game film from the previous year, to look at, what he did right and what he did wrong, and try to figure out, okay, how do I get better? What do I need to get better, coach? What do I need to work on to get better? And then go on the field every single day, Monday through Friday, and work on those things. I think that is vitally important, critically important to every young player that's out there. It's for these guys, for these young guys that are opting out and making a decision that, again, do not have medical issues as far as the COVID is concerned, or family medical issues. Okay. They're risking their betterment to either, become a starter for competition purposes, moving into training camp, to increase their playing time in this upcoming year, And in some of these guys' cases, it's a difference between them making the 53-man roster at the end of training camp and preseason and not making the team and spending the next couple of years bouncing around on the waiver wire from team to team to team, trying to find their fit. So I think it's vitally important for these young guys to be able to come in and do what they've got to do. And, really that's the major problem that I have with the opt-out by entire teams. If you're an older guy that's been in the league and you know what it is to be a pro and you know how to train yourself and you know your defense backwards and forwards and you know what the checks are and you know your offense and you know what the checks are and you understand what you're doing, that's a different deal because those guys have already paid the price, to be a pro. When you're young, there's work to be done in order for you to get to the level that you want to get to. And that's why, to me, these young guys opting out of working out with their teams and being with their coaches and finding some kind of continuity with the other players that they're going to be playing with is a critical mistake. Also for teams like, the Philadelphia Eagles, who pretty much, have a brand new, almost entirely new coaching staff. This coaching staff is handcuffed at the moment because Nick Sirianni and his staff, they haven't had an opportunity to really get to know these guys. That's what the offseason program and the OTAs and all these things are about. As a coach, it's one thing to, know football and be able to coach football. It's an entirely different thing to get to know each and every one of your players. If I'm a linebackers coach, I need to know each and every one of my guys. I need to know how do I interact and how do I deal with them on a daily basis? Because some guys I can get in their face. Some guys I got to put my arm around them and I got to tell them how good they are. And I got to pamper them a little bit. So for a coaching staff not to have the vital time that's necessary to spend with their new players, and they're new to them because they're a new staff, I think that, that hurts the Philadelphia Eagles in a monumental way. And they got a monumental mountain to climb, as they begin to try to rebuild this and fix, this organization and make this team competitive. Again, they need every advantage that they can possibly get. And for a new staff, you get an extra set of OTAs that your players are opting out of and not going to be able to attend because they're making the decision to do this. Hey, listen, you're watching the Seth Joyner Show. It's Talk to Him Tuesday. I'm going to stop chattering. I got some things I want to get to, but I want to get to you guys' questions. So fire off. I'm going to go back to the top of my interaction screen right here. And I'm going to start picking some questions here. Let's see. Emilio Rodriguez wants to know, Eagles are not going to mess up the first round. That's easy. And the other rounds that are concerning. Listen, we talked about it last week, Emilio. I think that Howie Roseman is in a position where he's got to hit a home run with this number 12 pick. Like I said, I'm not much for mock drafts, but I put together some stuff today that I want to share with you guys on, potentially what could happen. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, on draft day. It's impossible, but you can kind of throw some stuff out there and try to get an idea of where teams are going. And, there's people that are upset with the fact that the Eagles moved out of the 6th spot into the 12th spot. It is what it is now. Okay, so now let's try to figure out and try to decipher where the Eagles are going to, who's going to fall to them, in that position. They can't mess up the first round. You might be correct on that. I just can't see Howie Roseman going rogue and not picking a guy that's actually slotted, in that area, whoever falls to them. We can talk about the other rounds. Listen, the Eagles have 11 picks this year. they've got to get younger, and in doing that, they've got to be, much better in the later rounds of the draft. Jeffrey Lurie has talked about this collaborative effort by everyone involved to try to figure out, how to make the right picks at the right time and get the right guys that can come in and either in year 1, year 2, or year 3 be able to step up to the mic and be major contributors. But at the end of the day, in some ways, the draft still remains a crapshoot, because until they create a metric that measures, what's in a guy's chest and what's in a guy's head. I'm not talking about the Wonderlic test. I'm talking about his ability to think, football, to be football intelligent, because I've seen a lot of guys who bombed the Wonderlic test but had tremendous football smarts and intelligence on the field. So that test doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. But yeah, I agree with you. The Eagles have got a lot to do. They got a lot of picks, and they're in a position where they can't mess it up this year. Howie's got to, hit a home run all the way across the board. Let's see. You guys are making a lot of comments, not a whole lot of questions here. Let's see. Well, let's address this one. Jeanette says she hears that Jalen Hurts never leaves the building. I hope not. For his sake. I mean, the more he can do, the better. He's in a position where he's been handed a grand opportunity to win the number one job as a starting quarterback in the NFL for a organization that's pretty much rebuilding. So, I mean, as much as he can, he might not be able to spend a lot of time, with the offensive staff, but that doesn't mean that he can't get a playbook, and go to work. That doesn't mean that he can't get film and go to work. That doesn't mean that his coaches can't create a toolbox for him to go to work on the field, in the classroom, whatever it is, different things that he needs to work on to improve. Listen, we know the guy's a hard worker. We know the kid's going to grind it out. He's going to get in the weight room. He's going to do what he's got to do. We've all seen the social media videos of him working out, getting done what he needs to get done. The kid's head is in the right place. But there's nothing like, solid coaches helping you to get better. That's why you guys have heard me say, and I'll continue to say it over and over again, a player's ability to get better is intrinsically tied to a coach's knowledge of that position and a coach's knowledge of offense or defense. Because what that coach knows is what he can teach and pass on to that young player. Now, if that coach, is only an X's and O's guy, the only thing he has to offer to that player are X's and O's. But if he's a guy that understands technique and fundamentals, in Jalen's case, working on, footwork and getting his feet right and getting his body aligned properly and, release point, all of these different things to help him, become a better quarterback, being able to get to a point where he's comfortable enough in the pocket. If he knows he wants to go right, snap that ball in your drop and look left. Let's try to figure out how to maneuver and move that safety around, especially when you got single high safety. All of these little things, that a coach can be not necessarily in person be talking to, Jalen about, but things that he can give him, a toolbox, if you will, that he can provide for him, that Jalen can go out and work on these things on his own, and maybe even, to the point where they're videotaping it and the coach has the ability to look at it and then maybe send him an email or send him a video and have him talk about, you know, what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and what you need to work on and what you need to get right. So I love the fact that he's, you know, that he's always, you know, in the building. That's important. That just shows me that he's a guy that wants to get better. It shows me that he's a guy that cares, and he's a guy that's willing to put in all the work that's necessary to be the starter, you know, not only this year, but long term. Let's see, who else we got here? Interesting. So Bernie Grant wants to know, with so many holes to fill, which would you address with the 12th pick, offense or defense? It's interesting to me because I feel like, and this might be a good time to kind of jump into, you know, the Seth Joyner mock draft 101, the only one that you guys will ever see this year. Listen, we know that Trevor Lawrence is locked in at 1. Zach Wilson or Justin Fields is locked in at 2. The 49ers are probably looking at a quarterback. That could be Fields or Wilson, depending on, you know, who the Jets take. From what everybody's hearing, it's pretty much going to be Wilson, but it's not solidified until it's solidified. Then you got the 49ers. You know, they could be in the market for a quarterback. That could bring Trey Lance into the conversation. Or if no, I was already on the 49ers. We talked about that. I meant the Falcons. The Falcons could be in the market, you know, for a quarterback or a defensive end, in my opinion, a rush. And there's a lot of rush guys out there. If they're looking at another quarterback, then you bring into the mix either Trey Lance or Mac, the kid from Alabama. If that's the case, then, you know, within the first 4 or 5 picks, we got 5 quarterbacks off the board. You then move to the Bengals, which, in my opinion, you know, they're going to take Sewell. They've got to be able to protect Joe Burrow after what you saw last year. And then you got the Dolphins. You know, they're probably going to be in the mix for, you know, Jamar Chase if the 49ers decide not to take a quarterback and take the number 1 wide receiver, or Waddle if Chase is gone, or Pitts. I think Pitts is the guy if Chase isn't there, but I think Waddle's in the picture. Then you move to 7, you got the Lions. I think they go defense. They probably take a cornerback, you know, Pat Surtain. Then, you know, you got the Panthers at 8, wide receiver, quarterback, linebacker is there, depending on what happens, you know, with the quarterbacks. You know, maybe they take Micah Parsons. Maybe, you know, they take one of these top flight wide receivers that are still there. Then the Broncos at 9, I think they take the top rated cornerback in the draft right now is Farley, Caleb Farley. I think the Cowboys are in the market at 10 for a cornerback as well. You start to get a run on cornerbacks here. J.C. Horn. I think the Giants could possibly be in the market for a wide receiver. They're kind of unpredictable. They're one of my teams, you know, that I've highlighted here. There's some chatter starting to flare up about, you know, them possibly moving out of that spot. So that could change dramatically depending on if they trade and, you know, who moves in and who moves out. And then you got the Philadelphia Eagles, you know, at 12. And depending what happens, you know, on the run with wide receivers and cornerback, I still believe that the Eagles are in position to get one of these top flight players, either a wide receiver, if it's, you know, Waddle or Devontae Smith. Okay. And the Giants could be in the market. Smith could be gone there at 11. But the Eagles are, you know, still primed, you know, for one of those Alabama wide receivers in my position. And I'm not so against, the Eagles at 12, even looking at, defensive line and offensive line depth. You got Fletcher Cox, whose contract is coming up. He's getting a little long in the tooth. We had a barrage of injuries at the offensive line position last year. And while some of these young guys are going to, get better this year, when you build a football team, in my opinion, you always build from the inside out and back. So you got to solidify your defensive line, whether that's, a tackle or a rush in, not knowing, what the situation is going to be, with Barnett. And, you got Josh Sweat, but I'm not 100% sold that his knee is going to allow him to be an every down player. So you can start looking at some of those guys. Listen, I know some of you guys are saying, what about the linebacker position? I'm just not confident that, that the Eagles would spend a first round pick, especially a number 12 pick on a Micah Parsons, even if he's there. I think that they look elsewhere. I think that, a lot of mock drafts and a lot of the gurus are talking, the Eagles are either in the market for a wide receiver or a cornerback, whoever the best available is at that pick. But I'm not against, D-line help. I'm not against O-line depth. You got the Tucker kid from USC, very versatile. And you got Slater from Northwestern, who's already said that he's not opposed to moving into the interior and playing some guard. So now you've got another insurance policy. If Brandon Brooks, keeping my fingers crossed, winds up hurt again. So you got some options there. But if you're asking me who I pick, I go defense. I think that if the offense can stay healthy, if the offensive line can stay healthy, and these young wide receivers can develop and come along, that, we'll be fine. And the reason why I say that, and many of you won't agree, is because, in the last 10 drafts, the Eagles have drafted 11 different wide receivers. You can keep drafting them all you want, but at some point in time, you've got to develop these young players because we see many players come here, not get developed, go somewhere else, get the development and the coaching that they need, and then wind up flourishing. So, I mean, to a lot of people, that might not be a legitimate reason not to take a wide receiver, especially, if a Devontae Smith or a Waddle falls to you. That might not be a legitimate reason why. But I think that, Howie's at a point now where it'll come down to the most valuable guy, at that position. And at that point in time, whoever's left. And that could be a wide receiver. That could be a cornerback. That could be an offensive line, a defensive line, and lineman, in my opinion. But I think the defense needs a hell of a lot more help than the offense will need. And you can talk about explosion on the offensive side of the ball. You can talk about elite offenses if you want. You got a young quarterback that's continuing to develop. You can always go later on and get a top flight wide receiver. The offense is always going to be ahead of the defense. The defense is going to lag because, they're learning a new system. I mean, it's harder for defenses to figure it out, so much harder than it is for offenses. So if I'm making the pick, I'm either grabbing me a top flight cornerback to match with Darius Slay on the other side, or I'm going to beef up my defensive line so we can begin to get more pressure. And I'm talking about a rush guy that can give you production, a guy that you can project him to be a double-digit guy on the outside. That's my take there. You're watching the Seth Joyner Show. Today is Talk to Him Tuesday. I'm taking your questions. Send them, ship them, shoot them, and we'll definitely get to a few of them. Let's see, who do we got now? Let's see. All right, Adam. So Adam says, I thought Waddle might be available at 12. Now the draft gurus say he'll probably be gone by then. I hope they don't pick an O-lineman. Well, listen, you got a young quarterback. If you look at the last 3 drafts, what did the Eagles do? And sometimes you can kind of look at past drafts, especially the Philadelphia Eagles, to kind of get an idea of what they're trying to do. When Carson Wentz was here, you know, they made a decision to move on from Nick Foles. They made the decision that Carson Wentz was going to be the guy. And if you look at the last 3 drafts, what they did was they picked offensive linemen, they picked wide receivers to try to give Carson Wentz all the weapons that were necessary for him to be able to be successful. Now, I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% against them taking a wide receiver. I just feel like you wasted draft capital in past years on this position and it hasn't panned out. You know, let's try to figure out how to go about this a different way. Offensive line, what it does is it solidifies the protection for the quarterback and it gives you the ability to run the football. Now, I've always said that a quarterback's best friend, and until he reaches that point of being able to, you know, not manage the game anymore, but actually go out and take the game, you know, by the throat and really do what he needs to do. The quarterback's best friend is a running game and an offensive line. Okay. I think Jalen Hurts is the type of quarterback, and where he is in his development, he needs a running game. Okay. He needs a running game and he needs play action pass and misdirection. Those are the things that's going to make him comfortable. Okay. Because we want him to stay in the pocket and play the game from the pocket and use his athletic ability when he needs to, because the play is broken down and nothing's open. But if you give him protection and he begins to feel comfortable in the pocket, now he can buy himself the extra time for guys to uncover, for guys to win their battles, you know, down the field. You create the situation where you've got an offensive line that can open holes and create a running game so that now you can keep defenses off balance. You know, that's the only reason I say, you know, I'm looking offensive line, because you've got to build your football team. You can't build from outside in. You always have to build from inside out. I would suffice to say that teams would be better off building their offensive line and then going to get their quarterback than doing it the other way around. But that position has become so important, and there's such a big deal made about the quarterback position that teams actually do it the other way around. If I've got a solid offensive line and I got a good running back or 2 good running backs in my stable, now I can go and get my quarterback and groom that guy under the comfortability of a running game that will support him and an offensive line that will protect him. All right. Thanks for the question, Adam. Let's see. Where do we go from here? Sean wants to know, do you think Jeffrey Lurie will be heavily involved in the draft this year? Listen, from what we talked about on last week's show and what we've been hearing, I think that, you know, Jeffrey Lurie is all in. I don't know that it's a good idea that he's got his hands so heavily into it. But listen, the guy owns a $3.5 billion entity that he paid $185 million for. He can do whatever it is that he wants with it because it's his baby. At the end of the day, the great owners, in my opinion, what they do is they hire good football people and they sit back and they let their football people make the decisions. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't have a say at all or that he shouldn't be involved at all, because when you're writing the checks, okay, when Howie Roseman decided to sign Carson Wentz, you know, to the $128 million extension, that's Jeffrey Lurie's money. He has every right to have a say and be involved in that. To me, that's where it should end. You know, you hold your people accountable for the decisions that they make in your organization, your GM, your operations, your analytics people, your scouts. That's what they're there for. Let them make the recommendations, and then you sign off on it. To me, that's the proper way to do it. But from what we've been hearing, there's not a doubt in my mind at all that Jeffrey Lurie is going to be heavily involved in this. And I don't know whether this is because Howie has not been as prolific in drafting players the last couple of years, or whether he's always been like that. But we've never heard that before. But it seems to be a real viable thing this year. And I absolutely believe 100% that he's going to be involved. Let's see. Where do we go? Bobby wants to know, what do you think about the Eagles moving back again in the draft? Well, Bobby, it really all depends on the value that they can get. I'm of the belief that, unless you're in the market for a quarterback, or unless you're in the market for a specific player because you've built everything else, you feel like you're on the cusp of taking a monumental leap, and you're ready for the playoffs, and you're one player away, then you draft need, in my opinion. The Eagles are in a position where they must draft best available. They're in a rebuild, even though they won't say those words. If you've deciphered the chatter and you deciphered what was talked about by Jeffrey Lurie, you know that this team is in rebuild mode. Now, with potentially 3 first-round draft picks next year and an estimated $70 million in cap space, they can get well really quick. But this year is going to be a rebuild year. I don't expect for the Eagles to be extremely competitive. Now, we all would like for them to be, but let's just be, realistic about it. They need help on the offensive side. There's questions on the offensive line from a health perspective, and you got a second-year quarterback who started 4 games for you last year that you're handing over the reins to. There's going to be some glaring moments where things look really good, and there's going to be some head-scratching moments where fans are going to leave the stadium mad, and we're going to have plenty to talk about and break down in post game. And WIP and the Fanatic is going to have a field day. That's just the reality of it. But when you talk about building a team and retooling and rebuilding, you need assets, So it all depends, Bobby, on how far back you're talking about moving. If you're talking about moving back, 3, 4, 5 spots, I don't have a problem with that. I don't want to see us move back into 20 because I think there's a precipitous drop-off once you get 20 to 32. I think the talent level really wanes. But this draft this year is really deep at a lot of different positions. I mean, you got 5 quarterbacks, probably 4 or 5 wide receivers. You got maybe 3 to 5 cornerbacks. You got about 4 to 5 offensive linemen. You got some really good linebackers, about four really good linebackers, about 5, maybe 6 good edge rushers. So there's a lot of depth in this year's draft that even if the Eagles move back, they may not get that top shelf guy at 6 that, everybody seems to want. But if you can get additional assets that allows you to get a real solid pick, a real solid guy, or allows you to generate additional assets for next year, then I'm not 100% with them. I'm not that moved by them, moving back even further back from 12, because I just feel like this year's draft is just that deep. Let's see. Mr. O2 wants to know, what positions do you like in the first, second, and third rounds? That's interesting. like I said, I talked about, what I like, in the first round. I'm okay with a wide receiver or cornerback. I'm even okay with defensive line or offensive line help. You get to the second round, I think we really need to, consider the defensive and offensive line if the pick is a wide receiver or cornerback. I think by the time you get to the third round, we better be, and maybe, if I think we have 2 second rounds, that late second round pick, you might need to start considering, finding a companion in the draft and creating more competition at the linebacker position. I like to see what Davion Taylor and what Sean Bradley can actually do. I don't think that I think that sometimes, you have defensive coordinators like Jim Schwartz. I mean, his statement last year was, hey, when these guys are ready to play, they'll play. There's nothing like experience. And it was a sad situation for those guys that they didn't get an opportunity, to actually play at the highest level, in preseason and get an opportunity to show these coaches what they can do. That being said, you've got a third rounder, invested in Davion Taylor. You got to find out whether that guy can play or not, whether he can step up to the mic. You got to find out, with Sean Bradley, I believe he was a 6th rounder. You got to find out whether he could play. But there's nothing like competition. We know that Davion and Sean can play special teams. But if you can pick up a linebacker and, a solid one of these solid guys, in the second or the third round, I think that you got to create that competition. And if that means that one of those guys that you drafted last year are no longer a part of this roster, then so be it, because the competition is more important than guys' feelings and the fact that you drafted them last year and COVID created a situation where they weren't able to show, everything that they could do. Let's see. Emilio, you coming up with some good questions there. Emilio wants to know, are you concerned about any of the other teams in the division? And I would say absolutely. Absolutely. I think that Dallas's offense is going to be potent. I think we got an idea last year before Dak got hurt, what they could be. I think that they will invest considerable assets into the draft as far as their defense is concerned. And I think that there's, 100 plus, free agents that are still out there that are going to be basement bargain guys that they could plug in later down the road. They could be, big pickups for them. Washington was already coming last year. I'm not so sure that Ryan Fitzpatrick is the guy. The one thing that Ryan does is, that he can catch fire and he can make some things happen. But look at that defense. That defense is only going to get better when you consider that front four and a couple of other picks, behind him, maybe a linebacker or a secondary guy. That team is coming, and they're coming fast. Made the playoffs last year, with Alex Smith at quarterback. That football team is coming. And you could see towards the end of the year last year that the New York Giants are they're coming as well. You're going to have a healthy Saquon back, another year under Daniel Jones's belt. The defense started to play a little better last year. I think Joe Judge has got this team moving in the right direction, and they're kind of buying in to what he's bringing. So, yeah, you know what? The rest of the division is catching up. For a long time, it was just the Eagles and the Cowboys. But the rest of this division is now beginning to catch up, and the Eagles have got to do everything they can, to match wits with them. As they get better, we've got to continue to get better over time. Let me see. Well, let me jump over to some of these other things that's going on, in the NFL before, I take some more questions. You guys keep firing away. A lot of you guys got statements rather than questions. I need questions, man. Next time we do this, we're going to open it up almost like radio style. I have a number for you guys to call in, bring you guys on the show. You guys can come on and ask your questions face to face with me. I'm working on making that happen. But as far as the draft is concerned, there's a lot of, chatter going on. The Miami Dolphins made the big trade, with the Philadelphia Eagles moving into the 6th spot, moving out of the 12th spot, the Eagles moving into the 12th spot, so to speak. Now we're starting to hear that, things are heating up for the Dolphins. They're feeling like they want to move down even further. In the draft, I think they've got a guy that they're earmarking, a guy that they really like at 6. I got a sneaky suspicion that it might be Kyle Pitts that they're after, and they're feeling like, hey, we need to move down, to be able to get our guy. That the Atlanta Falcons at 4 and the New York Giants at 11. We're hearing chatter from them that they're not, Dave Gettleman said, hey, we're not immune to moving back even further out of the 11th spot. That could create major problems for the Eagles if they've got their eye on the guy and they try to project who it is that the New York Giants want. If someone falls in that slot ahead of them and they can't get the guy, that they're projecting, that could be problematic. I think the Falcons, even though they're kind of locked in, to Matt Ryan, contractually, monetarily for 2 more years, I really think that that's a football team at 4. They might not be in this position, again, at 4, that low. It might be a good time for them to think about, the heir apparent to Matt Ryan. But when you have an organization like the Falcons talking about, hey, we're looking at, moving back, maybe it's one of those situations where they're saying, okay, we can ride with Matt for 2 more years. We feel like he's still playing at a high level. We've got other needs specifically over on the defensive side of the ball. And if we can move back and gain additional assets in the process, then that allows us to address that where we really don't necessarily have to address the quarterback position at this moment in time. So that's that. Let's jump back on some more of these questions if I can find some. Let's see. Excuse me, guys. I'm just trying to find good questions for you. This is an interesting one. The Eagles Atlantic wants to know, have I looked at Alabama defensive tackle Christian Barmore? If so, what's my thoughts where he should be drafted? Listen, the guy played like a man possessed throughout the college football championship last year in the first game and the second game. Both teams had a hell of a time trying to block this guy. He is one of the guys, in my opinion, if you're thinking defensive tackle, that could, that the Eagles could potentially look at and potentially, take a 12, or even if they move back, there's a potential that he could be there. Listen, I like the kid. He's a different animal because when you watch him play, he's the type of player that there's 2 types of defensive tackles. You got run stoppers. These guys, it takes a double team to be able to move them. And, you're not going to be able to run the ball at them, especially if you single team them, if the blocking scheme requires that you single team him. And then you've got the guy who's just a pure pass rusher. He doesn't want to play the run. He's normally in the NASCAR package. And then you've got that third guy, that guy that's able to play the run and be a dominant force in the run. And when he recognizes pass, he can rush the passer. When I look at this kid Barmore, that's what I see. I see the complete package at defensive tackle, a guy that can rush the passer, that you don't have to sub him out in certain situations, but a guy on first and second downs, obvious run downs, those are situations where this guy can stay in the game and be a major asset to you. Listen, the Eagles haven't had two very dominant defensive tackles in a very, very long time. In a long time. I'm struggling in my mind. I'm just trying to think back who is dominant. You know, Fletcher, when he wants to be dominant, you know, he's dominant. Even when he doesn't want to be dominant, you know, he's not giving 100%, you know, he's a handful. But, you know, two guys in the middle to push the pocket makes life easier, you know, on the guys on the outside, because you make that quarterback step right or step left, oftentimes stepping right into a sack. So, hey, listen, I'm not against. I wouldn't be upset at all if this was the guy, you know, potentially at 12, or even if they move back. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but again, you know, if I'm the GM of a team, I'm going to build from the outside in. I'm going to build a stout defensive line, and I'm going to build a stout offensive line so that we can run whatever it is that we need to run on either sides of the ball. We can dominate the trenches. The team who dominates the trenches, 9 times out of 10 is going to be the team that wins the football game. That's why those two positions to me are so vital and so important. Everybody likes the flashy thing. They want the wide receiver that can get downfield and wreak havoc. And, you know, but you know what? If you can't protect the quarterback long enough for the quarterback, you know, to get it down the field, that's a moot issue. All right. Let's see. I'm not giving analytics, man. I'm just giving my thoughts. The one guy says I need to be paid for my analytics. Let's see. Where's the questions, dudes? Man, Emilio, you're on fire today. I'm just going to throw this one in here just because I don't normally touch Hall of Fame questions. But there was a big debate last week when Julian Edelman retired, you know, whether he was a Hall of Famer or not. I'm not going to say whether he is or he isn't. I'm just going to make this statement. I have a hard time when you consider the NFL and you look at the players of today and the players of my era and the players of yesteryear, because the game is so different. Especially, you know, when you throw into the mix a 17th game this season and what that does to the statistics. I'm not one to really compare players, the whole LeBron Michael debate. I just think that, you know, they're two great players in two different eras. Let's just, you know, enjoy, you know, both of them. But I think when you begin to talk Hall of Fames, then you have to make those comparisons. And how do you compare? You know, Dan Marino, in my opinion, to Peyton Manning? When Dan Marino threw the ball probably 25 times a game, and Peyton Manning threw the ball 40 plus times a game. How do you make that comparison? Okay, how do you make the comparison? You know, of linebackers of yesteryear when you could, you know, knock their block off, and how they play the game today. Statistically, how do you make the comparisons for a wide receiver, you know, who caught twice as many passes than a guy back in my day than that guy did, because that wasn't the way the league went back then. How do you make the statistical comparisons? How do you compare a Julian Edelman, you know, to some of the guys, you know, of my day? I think that Art Monk is a Hall of Fame wide receiver, and yet he's not in. If I had to, look at Art Monk and look at his body of work and having played against him and take a guy like Julian Edelman and stick him back in my day and have to face him and understand his body of work and how he would stack up in my era of football, I don't think that, we look at Julian Edelman in the same way. I'm not saying he's deserving. I'm not saying that he's not deserving. I just think that, it's extremely difficult in today's NFL to look at a player from my era and years gone by and say that this guy is Hall of Fame worthy in today's game, when today's game is so much more differently played than it was in my era. You can only jam a guy once at the line of scrimmage, so most of these routes that are being run because teams are afraid to get up and jam guys, take that one shot at the line of scrimmage, they're timing routes. You got your uncover route, so instead of, when the guy comes in and presses you in because he wants to get you to sink in so he can break away instead of just, knocking his head off, you can't do that anymore. And a lot of teams are just, quite frankly, afraid to. So the changes in the game more than anything, to me is the issue when you're talking about players and their Hall of Fame worthiness of today in opposition of yesteryear. Let's see what else we got. You guys are making a lot of comments about what we're talking about on here, but I need some good questions, man. And ladies. Let's see. All right. Since I'm a linebacker, I'll take this one. What's your opinion? Craig wants to know, what's your opinion on Parsons as the top linebacker in the draft, the kid from out of Penn State? And listen, I watched a lot of film on him. In my opinion, some of the best linebackers in the last couple of years, in my opinion, have been guys like Ray Lewis and Luke Kuechly. The one thing, that you saw from those two guys, and I think that he has the potential, to be at that level when you watch him play. He plays with a lot of speed, plays with a lot of decisiveness, and he's nasty at the point of contact, whether you're talking about taking on a offensive lineman or, tackling, his ability to blitz. He plays with a lot of speed. Ray was fast. Luke Kuechly was fast, sideline to sideline. And that's what I see, with this kid. When you watch him on film, he just jumps off the film because he looks like he's playing at 100 miles an hour and everybody else is playing at 75. Very instinctual. He looks like he's ultra prepared. It doesn't seem like, he gets fooled very much. Just a great, solid football player. Would I love to see him in Eagles green? Absolutely. I just don't think that the Philadelphia Eagles value the position enough to warrant picking this kid at 12 or wherever it is that they wind up picking. But I think players like this change the complexion of your defense. The Panthers' defense was great, and the Ravens' defenses were great because you had those two guys man in the middle. I know from having played with great players, Byron right next to me and all the defensive linemen that were lined up in front of me and all the guys in the secondary behind me, great players create this level of competition on the football field. And when you create that level of competition and accountability, you go into each game, you want to be the guy. You want to make plays. You want to be the reason why you win. When you go into that film room on Monday, you don't want to be the guy. when you're watching the film that the coaches are talking about and potentially ripping because you didn't get it done. You got 10 other guys that's holding up their end of the bargain, and you're not. That's not going to happen when you have guys like that, because it raises the level of everybody on the defense, and it makes your entire defense that much better, not only because you have that guy and he's making so many plays, but because he inspires everybody else around him to raise their level of play and to make plays and to try to get it done. All right. I got time for one more. One more here. Let's see. Let's end with something positive. It's a lot of statements, guys. Where's the questions? This right here. Adam, you again, huh? Some guys just have a knack for coming up with great questions. This will round out the show. He wants to know, do you think they'll give Mailata the starting left tackle job or give it to Driscoll? And listen, I don't think they're going to give it to anyone, Adam. I think that Driscoll is going to wind up being a backup. I think we're headed towards a Mailata Dillard showdown come training camp, and I like to see it. I saw a tweet or article today or something that said that Mailata is better than Dillard, and I was like, I wanted to reply, of course, Captain Obvious, but at the end of the day, Jordan Mailata, I'm impressed with what I saw. I was extremely disappointed to see Doug Peterson and Stoutland, pull him last year and insert JP back into the lineup. The kid had played well for 3 weeks. He was getting it done, and you move him out, and for what? The season's lost. You only got 4 wins under your belt, or 3 wins. There was no reason to make that decision. That was the time where you let that guy stay there and play and gain as much confidence and as much experience as you could possibly have. I like the strides that he's made, but then again, you got to think about it. I forget where in the first round the Eagles drafted Andre Dillard. I want to say they may have drafted him at 9. That might be wrong. That sounds a little too low. But at the end of the day, they believe that he's a guy that should be a starter. They drafted him to replace Jason Peterson. So at the end of the day, they want him to be the starter. Can you imagine Jordan Mailata being the starter, a 7th-round project from 3 years ago, and Andre Dillard being the backup, the 2 years removed from being drafted in the first round? You talk about egg on your face. But if it's really about competition, and that's what Nick Sirianni has talked about, then this needs to happen. And I think that there's no way on God's green earth that Jordan Mailata loses this competition. I think that he goes into next year and he is the starting left tackle. And if he can stay healthy, he's going to get progressively better. Just hoping that, he plays with a certain level of intensity all the time. The thing about Jordan, sometimes he plays extremely hard, and other times you can see he kind of takes plays off. I want to see him be able to play at a high level consistently. And if he has a starting job and he knows that he's got a former first rounder behind him, maybe that's the inspiration that he needs. I think that he can be an all-pro tackle. Maybe not a first-team all-pro, but maybe a guy that's, a second or third, tackle or backup. I think he has that kind of ability, but he's got to be able to be on the field long term. He's got to have the opportunity to win the job, but also the opportunity to stay there and continue to get better week after week after week. And then maybe, Dillard is a guy that, when Lane is done, he moves over to the right side. But you've got some depth there and you've got some options. But I just want to see Jordan Mailata be the guy. I just think that the only thing that the one thing that he's got to improve on, heads and shoulders above how he played last year. He's got to figure out, the TE and AT stunts. Those gave him monumental problems last year. The only time he got beat was on stunts. He got his shoulders turned, got pinched, and that defensive tackle looping around, he wasn't able to come out of it and pick that guy up. But if he can figure out how to do that, because in the run game, solid. When he's one-on-one against a guy and he kicks and he sets properly and he gets his hands on a guy, that rush is over. But I think that, I think he's the guy. And I really like his progress. I'm impressed with what Stoutland has been able to do with him. I'm impressed with his ability to stay with it even after the back injury, to just go out and continue to work and get better. He's made himself an NFL football player after not ever having played the game in 4 years. He's made himself a starter. He deserves that job. Well, guys, that's the show for today. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys viewing. Appreciate the questions. I will be right back here next week with another show. We'll be leading into the draft coming up the following Thursday, and excited to see who the Eagles pick with their first round draft pick this year. That's our show today. As usual, I will tell you guys, be good to each other and take care of one another. But most importantly, love each other. I'll see you guys right back here on the Seth Joyner Show next week. Peace.